The beginning of the guide asks you to consider issues related to audience. Who is the audience? And we're not just talking about broad categories. If possible, to get more specific is great. You may say, for example, that our audience are volunteers that have worked with the organization. Well, maybe that breaks into subcategories. Maybe we're talking about new volunteers. Maybe we're talking about experienced volunteers. Those are two different categories of audience, and they will have different characteristics that may affect the way you relate to them. Most probably will affect the way you relate to them and the way you have them relate to each other. And so, that next question is, what are their characteristics? And that's a critical thing to get underneath. For example, if we follow the issue around volunteer, you may have experienced volunteers who are very willing to share, and through your experience working with them, you see that that is the case. That bodes well for some type of online knowledge exchange, possibly between those experienced volunteers and those who are new volunteers. You may say one of your goals, in fact, is that you would like to see that kind of knowledge exchange occur, which would relieve pressure on you so that you're able to do other things as part of that project. Now, if we look at the characteristics of the newer volunteers, we might see something like they don't necessarily have a high enough level of trust yet because they don't have an association with the organization, that might challenge their willingness to openly ask questions online of those more experienced volunteers who are perfectly willing and ready to share their knowledge. What are you going to do about that? Something has to happen. Now, without thinking this kind of stuff through beforehand, you may make some crucial mistakes. You'll make assumptions about the audience. You may say to yourself, oh, the new volunteers will be totally hungry for information. They'll get quick answers. Well, that might be the case, but they may not ask the questions. And that may shift the kind of strategy you use with those new volunteers online. Maybe you won't ask them to ask questions. Maybe you'll post those questions and then have those experienced volunteers answer them. Maybe you'll gather questions from those volunteers anonymously through a survey. These are the kinds of things you have to think about. Now, finally, in relation to audience, one of the core components is figuring out what you don't know. And there are things you don't know. So you have to think through what are some of the things that we don't know about this audience that could affect the way we work with them online. For example, surveying those new volunteers is critical. You're going to want to bring them online. What are the questions you need to ask? Well, maybe you need to know what kind of access they have to the internet. Do they have regular access or not? Do they access the internet mostly from home or from work? That might be one set of questions that you can't answer right now that would be useful to find the answer to. Maybe, for example, you are assuming that your experienced volunteers will be as willing to share online as they are at events. Maybe that's not true at all. You probably should ask them. You should find out, are most of those existing volunteers willing to share online? If they are, in what form would they share online? We could go on and on about this. The core here is, who are the audiences? What do you know about them that will affect the way you work with them online? And finally, what don't you know about them that you need to find out?